Would mute yourself.
Greetings, dear friends. Welcome to the Creative Lab session, Awakening the Souls of Our Nations. I welcome you on behalf of the Hekal group from Jerusalem and the Klangschale group from Germany, who cooperatively working with the 2025 initiative for many years, holding this space, creative space for all of us to be together from around the world, learning to recognize and express our oneness, standing as representatives of the one planetary server. Thank you for joining us. I invite Uta to introduce our work today and lead us. Over to you, Uta.
Yes, thank you, Alexander. Welcome, everyone, to this Aquarius session of the Nations Lab. We are spiritual students from many nations that come together every month as a council of elders in training. We are here experimenting towards Aquarian planetary governance. We practice skills which may be required of the delegates of a future United Nations. And we are trying out these skills each time on another world issue. Today, we will focus on the United Nations itself. And we do so addressing it as an evolving organism, looking at its original vision and its present condition and needed and possible steps ahead. As we all know, the United Nations has a central part to play in the formation of the Planetary Ajna Center. A spiritual UN would provide a direct and reliable channel between hierarchy and humanity. Well, for this pivotal year of 2025, we haven't quite reached this mark of a UN which consciously works under the guidance of the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. But let's just imagine this. We can hold this vision and nurture it as a seed here in the Nations Lab and also in our other groups. And today we have the joy and privilege to have a group with us which works with this aim, and already for a number of years, meeting every week, having this steady rhythm. It's the UN Meditation Group. We will hold our session in the usual format. We start by setting the stage, by convening in our council chamber of elders in training, meditation. And then we will listen to the presentation of the UN group. Afterwards, we do a little silence to just let it settle in, sink in. And then we will have our sharing and a brief subjective wrap up at the end. For those who are less comfortable with the English language, we will have a text of the presentation in the chat box, so you can read along. Okay, so let us start with the meditation. Taking a deep breath. Settling into ourselves. Into this place of inner stillness. We are grounded in our body and breathing with the earth. Standing in love and clarity and freedom as the soul. Imagining ourselves standing on a high mountain overlooking our nation. Feeling our nation, our love for it. Our care. And also our freedom from it. Let's imagine taking on the function of a delegate for our nation, a wise elder that is invited to bring the wisdom of our nation to the General Assembly of the United Nations. Let's take a moment to try on this task, doing as if, feeling as if. Now, in this high office, let us convene in our council chamber for elders in training. And we offer it as a protected seed for a United Nations of the future. Visualizing ourselves entering the quiet and clear and spacious chamber. Immersing into the atmosphere of this chamber, into the geometrical harmony. Taking our places in geometric order. And for a moment, imagining delegates from all nations with us in the council chamber. Sensing the presence of these planetary elders in training, seated together in geometric order. In the center of the chamber, visualize the flame of our combined, sustained will to love. Tune our hearts to it. And let us sense our bundled potency as the planetary group, standing, holding, having this magnetic presence of intent, sustained love. And tuning now into the mental space of the council chamber, a calm, clear, lighted space. It vibrates to the rate of the ajna center of the planet. And through this vibration, we are linked with our fellow elders in training in all nations. Ajna center of the planet. Holding this shared lighted space stable. As we hold it, we are aware of four great Deva beings which hold the space with us, one at each direction, at the north, south, east, and west. And into this lit space, we now invite Judy from the UN group to take us into the living organism of the United Nations in its present form. And we may now open our eyes for the visuals. And if you would like to read along, please refer to the text in the chat box.
So thank you, Uta. Can you hear me, everyone? Am I unmuted?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So I will be speaking on behalf of our group today, and I would like to begin by thanking the Hekal and Kanshala group for all the work that has been done through the Creative Lab by bringing together the community of nations, portraying their personalities and souls through the snapshots that are offered by the disciples of those nations. We have been regular participants in these labs to support the family of nations. We would also like to offer a special acknowledgement to the 2025 Initiative Coordinating Group, who has provided the platform to host the lab. Alexander from this group has been a catalyst to bringing many groups together and provides a home for our group, the one that is represented here, the UN SDG Meditation Group. Today, we are grateful to have the opportunity to present a snapshot of the United Nations to you. The United Nations is a living entity that we have come to know, love, and serve, both as a divine being and an instrument of the plan. Conceived as a planetary organization, the United Nations is also an organism. While we will attempt to adhere to the format of sharing the vision upon which she was founded, describing her subjective reality, and give a current overview of work being done, as well as challenges to that work in the areas of right relations and global sharing, it is impossible to present this as a first-person narrative. The United Nations is a collective. Its name is its aspiration. United Nations. Even using a pronoun to refer to the United Nations is tricky. It does not do justice. We, us, our would probably work best, and yet this collective is also a singularity, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. As a collective, the United Nations is graced with the most dedicated and diverse array of servers to humanity, while also hosting the vagaries of self-serving nations. The United Nations brings out our collective best, yet often falls victim to the most pedestrian aspects of our humanness. Formed globally in 1945 by 50 nations to support the world order at that time, 80 years later, it now is the home to 193 nations at various stages of development. Birthed in the Piscean Age, the United Nations is Aquarian by nature. Comprised of nations and their governments, the United Nations, rather than a strictly political international organization, outpictures our global culture and civilization. And while the United Nations brings forth the ideas and mandates of the collective, it is not an enforcing agent, but rather its power relies on the agreements of the nations which are its members. This is its strength and its weakness. As the only international platform, the United Nations is an evolving entity that is far from complete. Only hierarchy is privy to the role the United Nations is destined to play in the unfolding of the plan, and in what capacity it is meant to serve the externalization. Our group, in whose name we will attempt to offer a snapshot of the United Nations, collectively hails from a variety of nations and includes those who have served under her auspices, have followed her history, and who have been magnetized to her work and vision. Offered by trained observers, this picture is nevertheless one that is presented through our lens, and as such is subject to our own limitations. I would like here to express appreciation to our members from the UN SDG group who have worked together over these past weeks to advance the ideas in this offering. So as we begin, let us consider the question, what is the original vision of the UN? We would suggest that it is found in the preamble of the United Nations Charter, which reads as follows. We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in large freedom, and for these ends to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used, save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples, have resolved to combine our efforts to accept these aims. Accordingly, our representative governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full power, found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations, and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations. So let us take a moment to breathe in this idea, offered in the name of we the people. And now let us consider a subjective understanding of the United Nations. Our group involvement with the United Nations started through supporting the Sustainable Development Goals offered to humanity in 2015. This was the first comprehensive vision agreed to by every nation, representing humanity's highest aspiration. As a group, we work under the ashram of synthesis, supported by the Master Morya, Master Dwal Kul, and Master Rakotsi. The synthesis of their energy, supported by rays 1, 2, and 7, runs through our work. We evolved to understand that the impulse by this ashramic center, our work could not stand apart from the United Nations. So as we focused on the 17 Sustainable Goals, we realized that it was inclusive of it. We soon came to know the Deva of the United Nations and the Devic army that she directs to manifest the Sustainable Development Goals, which are already realized as a vision of the plan held in etheric substance. As we work with and articulate the SDGs, we realize that we were working with the economy of the one life as it flows through the United Nations and we the people. We began to research the United Nations in the Blue Books, developing a compilation of its hierarchical focus. Through this research, we discovered that the United Nations was birthed through a Shambhala impulse in 1945, after World War II, at the same time that we were given the Great Invocation. Through recognition and alignment with the Deva of the United Nations, it was understood that her work was to restore the temple of humanity through right relations among nations. She has an intimate and symbiotic relationship with the Deva of humanity, one Deva working through the collective soul of nations, and the other through the individual souls as a collective. As we work weekly with the Deva of the United Nations, he is becoming more formed and energized by the love in which we hold her. The Devas of the seventh ray work in communion with this Deva as her substantive army. We have also sensed that he interfaces with that great Deva, the mother of the world, through the one economy. Knowing the Deva of the United Nations, we were brought next to consider the personality that he works through. The United Nations is composed of 5 basic centers: the Secretary General, the General Assembly, the Social and Economic Council, the Security Council, and the International Court of Justice. This is her 5-pointed star. With that understanding, we came to the recognition that divine humanity is also a 5-pointed star, as is the Christ. These 3 stars, Christ with his ashram, the United Nations, and humanity, stand in relationship and are an aspect of each other. Just like our individual centers, which we work to refine and purify, the centers of the United Nations also need to be refined and reformed. Weekly, that is part of our work as we vision the end from the beginning with each center. Each week, as we impulse this transformation and do the transmutive work, we stay aware of what is happening on the ground, indicating for us that the light is seeping into the various centers. While this aspect will be addressed later, I would like here to give an example. The Security Council has long needed a rebalancing, and our focus has been to send energy that it may demonstrate, quote, a new equity and harmony. Recently, there was a recognition by the Security Council that Africa was not represented in the Council. A vote was taken giving 2 seats to Africa, countries to be chosen, passing this resolution unanimously. A recent impression regarding the United Nations' subjective nature has to do with the rays of the United Nations. Pondering this, the understanding came that the 1st, 2nd, and 7th ashram of synthesis under which we work was in fact the UN's ray makeup. Ray 1 being her monadic ray through the impulse of Shambhala. Ray 2, her soul ray, the ray of this planetary system. And Ray 7, her personality ray, the ray that includes all 7 rays, making up the collective rays of all nations, with Ray 7 focused on order and manifestation. The last aspect to impart regarding the subjective nature of the United Nations has to do with a specific center of light which provides a unique ashramic impress. Working with TPS, the planetary system, and the Labdoma, which is representative of the 49 points of Christ's ashram, we interface with point 6.7. This is the energetic of the 7th subray of the 6th ray. Being the last subray, it relates our current evolutionary focal point as we move from Ray 6 to Ray 7. Its energy is 6, community or hierarchy, and 7, order. This point also includes the relationship of Ray 6, ideals, and Ray 7, manifestation. The energy, in effect, is the community of order, whose keynote states, I stand for the law of right relations. This sums up the energetics behind the United Nations, with six-ray ideals and hoped-for seventh-ray manifestation, especially seen focused through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And yet, in many ways, the whole Labdoma offers an energetic impress. Where previously certain masters would be invoked to support our work, recently hierarchy, standing as the ashram of the Christ, has been sensed. At first it was on occasion, but now there is a continuous overshadowing. We recognize that the note of our group and work, combined with the devas, has become sufficient to reach and attract hierarchical attention, which seeks to refine the instrument of the United Nations and to expand it from a fourth plane to a fifth plane instrument. The visioning of the future UN through this creative lab, supported by trained disciples of hierarchy, may clearly be an impress. And now Jose Becerra, a light worker known to many of us, through his blog Hierarchy, has begun writing of the United Nations 100 years in the future, with the reappeared Christ as the Secretary General. Members in our group have sensed both these visions. This telepathic interplay is something to ponder. So let's pause and take a breath. And please align with the Deva of the United Nations as we continue our presentation. We move now to the United Nations' current work. Since in our meditation we focus on the centers of the United Nations with an eye toward their wholeness and reform, I would like to use that focus to look at current work through that lens. Each center is followed by the assertion that we hold. Secretary General, to radiate magnetic leadership. There have been past Secretary Generals who have brought a spiritual leadership to this important role. Utant, Dag Hammarskjöld, Kofi Annan come to mind. In 2027, the position once again will be open. There is a growing recognition that feminine energy is needed to balance the United Nations, and that a woman holding that office would model a greater gender equity as well as offset its masculine driving force. In an article about the Security Council, where there were 5 women delegates, it offered the observation that when the men voted, they voted to stop war, and when the women voted, it was to bring about peace. This indicates a qualitative difference in perspectives between the male and female energies. The General Assembly, to uphold the common good. Most recently, there was a resolution passed adopting December 21st as the United Nations Meditation Day. It was observed for the first time this past solstice. It stands as an important understanding and energetic shift. The Economic and Security Council, to reflect the voices of all nations in support of we the people. This is the center that coordinates the humanitarian effort put forth by the United Nations, including the World Food Program and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. While the SDGs are falling short of their targets, still 80 countries have signed on and 40 have submitted plans. and the effort of the future UN, which met in September to consolidate areas of need and achievement, was sponsored by the Economic and Social Council. It looked at prioritizing and combining the SDGs and passed the Pact of the Future, which included a global digital agreement and a focus on youth leadership, among other things. The Security Council, to make decisions based on a new equity and harmony. There is a general understanding that a single veto should not have the power to stop an otherwise unanimous decision. Alternatives to this mechanism of decision-making, such as deciding by consensus, is being looked at. However, the 5 standing partners are resistant to giving up or sharing their current power. In contrast, however, there was the recent vote to expand membership to include 2 seats for Africa, who was not represented. The International Court of Justice, to anchor the United Nations in law and order within the center we call humanity. This court supports and defined international law in the UN Charter in 1945 and has expanded to include the International Criminal Court in 1998. Its decisions are upheld by heads of state. While the work in this area is very important, the fact that a number of countries have not signed on to abide by the decision of the court undercuts its effectiveness. This is an area that needs to be more concerted area of focus. Conversely, decisions around war crimes and standards of conduct in war are impactful in their pronouncements, and nations' accountability are viewed through the outcome of courts' decisions. So in summary for this section, the United Nations has worked to maintain international peace and security through 173 negotiated peace agreements throughout the world. It seeks to maintain peace through its unarmed peacekeepers. It has played a critical role in fostering global identification and cooperation, addressing pressing international issues. The United Nations planted the seed for peace through the declaration and program of the Action on the Culture of Peace, passed by consensus in the General Assembly in 1999. The United Nations protects human rights through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, and through the UN Charter, it seeded those thoughts in We the People. The United Nations delivers humanitarian aid, providing humanitarian assistance through disaster relief, the World Food Program, and to refugee populations. Sustainable development and environmental protections have been enacted through the 1972 Conference on Environment, the Climate Accords, and the SDGs. The UN works to eradicate disease in partnership with the World Health Organization. And finally, in advancing sustainable development, it provides a framework to address global challenges. And so we breathe into this 5-pointed star. So current challenges and a way forward. We will look at both international relations and global sharing through the economy of the one life. So now we'll turn to look first at the current challenges to right relations through excerpts from The Will to Good, Rethinking International Relations. That's an article in the World Goodwill Newsletter, number 3, from 2024. So this material is taken from that. The more we fill our imaginations with fear about the future and a sense that people of goodwill have failed, the more we remain blind to the buildup and strengthening of the forces for good that is constantly occurring within and between nations. The will that leads nations to work toward right relations demands that attention be directed to the spiritual and social causes of the problems and international relations as much as to the problems themselves. And this is to be balanced with an equal focus on searching out and recognizing the serious rethinking and purposeful action. Problems in international relations reflect illusions and glamours deeply embedded in the human sense of relationship. Separate, divided from each other and from the natural world, all competing over what appears to be ever-depleting resources, blinding us to the significance and power of the revelation of wholeness and interdependence that has become such a feature in modern thought. Imagination and intuition are beginning to be exercised in response to the challenges of an increasingly interdependent global order. The old system of competing sovereign nations and vast multinational corporations, each with their own agendas, no longer works in this world. The limiting veils of separation are breaking apart, and new possibilities are emerging for nations to act from the perspective of interdependence. Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld commented on, quote, the unique privilege it was to be launching one of humanity's greatest experiments of all time. Even if all efforts to make it succeed end in failure, he noted, they would still make a difference because they would be supporting, quote, the laying of the foundations for what will ultimately succeed. It is this sense of contributing to the building of a world of right relations that is in the process of being born. There are signs that the post-war order of the world, dominated by relations between big powers, is beginning to break up, allowing the space for something new to emerge. These signs can best be seen in the politics of the recent Summit of the Future. The dynamics of climate change politics means that SIDS, small island developing states in UN parlance, are acquiring a new status as pricks to the consciousness of wealthy nations. This, at least in part, explains why the visionary Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, is becoming such an influential force, especially through her leadership of the Bridgetown Initiative, aimed at reforming the international financial architecture to make the SDGs more equitable and just. United Nations power is now beginning to be wielded by nations and by major players from civil society that are becoming increasingly astute in pushing for a more interdependent order designed to eliminate extreme poverty, protect human rights, and advance flourishing, sustainable human development. We can expect to see a new breed of leader emerge. The Summit of the Future has made concerted efforts in supporting youth leadership. The Charter of the United Nations is to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of common ends. That's a quote. Moving from conflict to harmony implies replacing competition with collaboration, the desire for power with goodwill, domination with mutual aid and sharing. How can humanity awaken to the vision of world unity? The ideals of this new order would need to start with a definition of peace as a quality of soul. Experiencing the failure of the materialistic and ego-driven forces, international relations needs to embrace a new moral dimension that could help humanity build consensus. Ms. Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, in an act of synchronicity, answered the plea for a current motto by giving us the most synthetic and powerful of all thought forms, Ubuntu. I am because you are. An invitation for all of us to embrace our shared destiny. A creative tension may be possible, a tension from which we might be able to invoke the highest in us. For light to reveal darkness, we have the power of the group to ground the soul in service and to help fire the world with the spirit of relationship and to infuse human consciousness with the light, love, and power that it needs. This is the first time the human community has ever been pushed to this degree of realization of our fundamental interdependence. It's closer than our heart. It is within us. Goodwill is also growing in the world, but our systems are still catching up. The future of how we're going to be governing the world has to come from sources of knowledge that are both scientific and religious, something that is evidence-based, but also taps into the nature of who we are. It is the responsibility of all of us to live and hold this vision. I'm going to take a breath. And now let us look at the current challenges to right sharing through the lens of the divine economy. When we think of the economy of the one life, it includes all energy, force, and substance. However, for many, economy and money are conflated. We have been told that money is concretized energy. Money is also a medium through which the energies of right relationship flow. To extrapolate then, problems around the economy are blockages or obstacles to flow and to right relationship. One issue to consider is whether there is a common thought form that we all hold regarding what constitutes an adequate share of global resources to maintain the environment and the global common good that all nations are willing to adhere to and support. When one looks at things like the UN Charter, the Declaration of Human Rights, and the Sustainable Development Goals, there would seem to be a basis for a universal understanding, but blockages to adherence of this standard are a major concern. These blockages include the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, such as corporations and rich oligarchs that decrease flow in and between nations. There needs to be reform and simplification within the United Nations bureaucracy around procuring funding, a need for an increase in women's involvement in finance development as primary spenders supporting households and children, and the need for creative financial planning and the will to reach goals. This is germane to the common good. Another blockage to energetic flow is rising nationalism. This has had the effect of countries dropping out of signed treaties, such as we have recently seen with the United States in the climate change Paris Accord. Such actions place an undue burden on others and stems directly from issues around right relations. As a function of the new group of world servers, it is important to recognize that part of the energy, force, and substance that we have to work with includes directing higher energies to both create synthesis and break up blockages to right sharing, while increasing light within those workers who are instrumental in supporting the flow of resources to the common good. Additionally, it is important to recognize that the scale of global planning that is taking place in the world is actually unprecedented. Meetings like the Summit of the Future offers an opportunity for human planning by people from all levels of community, local, regional, national, and global. This represents an important opportunity to exercise creative imagination and cooperation and to articulate the vision that is being worked toward. For each of us, it is also important to understand that there is no us and them. We each are a fractal of the United Nations and have to align our energy, force, and substance with these same universal goals. We all share in a responsibility for the common good within our own environments. This then shifts the responsibility to we, the people. So let us take a breath. I'd like to conclude now with the words of the Master. We end with Master DK's words, who tells us that the United Nations is a group conscious entity whose purpose is to generate unity and thereby changing the old world order of nationalism to a new world order through the energy of synthesis and the spiritual will of Shambhala. This is to be done through the work of the new group of world servers. So here's our first quote. Victory for the United Nations through a focusing of a one-pointed desire plus the effort to understand and express the quality of spiritual will is that which is the distinct feature of the Shambhala force. This will force is available for right usage, but the power to express it lies in its understanding and group use. So for this, we are working. The avatar of synthesis has become, for the time being, Christ's close associate. His function, in unison with the energy of the Christ, is to generate spiritual will in humanity. His potency works within the Assembly of the United Nations, though not in the Security Council. He is there generating a slowly growing will to unity. His activity is necessarily mass activity, for he can only channel his energies through the mass consciousness or through group consciousness. Through group conscious entities such as hierarchy, the United Nations, or humanity. The focal point of his efforts and the agent through which distribution of his energy can be made is the new group of world servers. This group is uniquely related to the avatar of synthesis. And I would like to point out in that quote again that it is through a group conscious entity such as hierarchy, the United Nations, or humanity. These three together were named as group conscious entities. Another quote, the old order must pass. For its abolishing, the United Nations are fighting, but the difficulties are many, even though the spiritual strength of all good men is on their side, and the forces of light are fighting to aid them. Nationalistic spirit constitutes a grave peril to the world. If perpetuated in any form except contributory to the good of humanity as a whole, it will throw the world back into dark ages. The United Nations, with all its faults, limitations, and weaknesses, and materialism, are focusing the conflict between the dweller and the angel, and more decisively throwing the weight of their efforts and aspirations on the side of the angel, thus restoring lost balance and slowly producing on a planetary scale those activities and conditions which will eventually dispel illusion, dissipate glamour, and devitalize prevalent Maya. They are doing this by increased clear thinking of the general public and all nations, and by growing ability to conceive ideas in terms of the whole, in terms of desirable world order, and their capacity to discriminate between the forces of light and the potency of evil or materialism. And I would like to conclude with this last quote, which the Master thought important enough to state in two books, The Reappearance of the Christ and The Externalization of the Hierarchy. The world is not yet full of love, and few there are who understand the true meaning. But, speaking symbolically, when the United Nations has emerged into factual power, the welfare of the world will be assured. What is that welfare but love in action? What is international cooperation but love on a world scale? So thank you, everyone, for listening to the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Judy and group, for this rich and deep overview. It is so important, so central to our work. Let's take a moment. Let's take whatever we have heard now into the silence of the council chamber. Letting it settle in our shared space. And now, as a working group, let's expand and lift our consciousness now to come into telepathic resonance with the spiritual hierarchy. Letting ourselves be drawn to the periphery of the vortex of their centennial conclave. Get a sense of this assembling vortex of the centennial conclave. Let us take our place on the periphery of it. And from this vantage point, let us now focus on the UN, so to speak, from above, on its challenges and opportunities as humanity struggles in this great world tension. Let us take a few moments for this observation. Let us be aware of being a bridging agent for the avatar of synthesis to work through the United Nations into humanity. Continuing to hold this alignment, let us now gently lower our focus, taking another moment to allow the concrete mind to register the impressions and formulate them into words, holding the full alignment as much as we are able. Okay. Let's come back to our personal grounding and open the floor for our sharing now. For this session, let's see if we can keep the focus on the UN in its present form, its ideal, present reality, and its possibilities. And we may go deeper into the future in another session. So this is for the present.
I can start the sharing. Sorry, I didn't hear whom I interrupted, but so apologies, and I will continue. As I was listening to the reading of the preamble of the United Nations Charter, it was like a breath of fresh air. Going back into that state of open public consciousness that recognized the value of unity and of united effort, united action. I recognize that it's something that it's so much is missed now in the public discourse. Of course, in our circle, we talk about this all the time, and it's for us, it's a given that, but it's not so clear in public consciousness. With such a rise of nationalistic movements around the world, taking control of governments, and there is a sense that we are in that backward swing of history that was mentioned in the last quote that Judy shared with us. And I think it's very important for us to, I don't know how to express it, not just statically hold that vision among ourselves, knowing that unity is the right way to go. It's the evolutionary direction for humanity, but magnetizing these ideas as much as possible, as much as we can through our meditations, invoking the energy of will, as also was quoted in one of those sharings on the screen. The idea of unity need to become a newly empowered recognition. So much gratitude to Judy and the group who prepared this sharing and brought our focus to this recognition at this time.
I am humbled by such a beautiful, comprehensive sharing, a blossoming of work. Thank you. So rich, as Uta said, that from the thought of, let's see what comes to mind, the David beans, which are increasingly present in our work, and the telepathic nature of the work. Mentioning Jose Becerra's work with the United Nations and future and so on. There's just this incredible, beautiful synchronicity. At the same time, may we be led from chaos to beauty. Here in the United States, as in the world, so much fear and chaos, and the Dark Lodge creating chaos. And during this year of 2025, the fourth ray is establishing itself much more fully. Harmony through conflict. Conflict is the lower aspect because it's a fourth ray formula. May we be led from chaos to beauty. An affirmation of the true and the good and the beautiful. And the Tibetan master gives us a symbol to work with when working with this formula. Lead us from chaos to beauty. A square or oblong composed of kaleidoscopic mass of inchoate colors, moving, pulsating, and in constant, indescribable confusion. Superimposed upon this square is a radiant sun with a penumbra composed of the 7 prismatic colors. And I see these over the UN in our world. These radiate from the sun in regular rhythmic bands, producing a marvelous blaze of color. The background of the square appears to have its confusion of colors shown of a heavy, brilliant kind and quality. The scheme of beauty emerging is translucent and delicate and radiantly living in hue. So I just offer that as a image, a visualization perhaps that we might keep in mind during these times. Thank you.
Alexander, can I speak?
Please do.
Thank you, Judy, for such a beautiful and compelling presentation. I would like to ask you a question, and it's about the role of national leadership. We understand that rising nationalism is a threat to humanity and to the workings of the United Nations. We also understand from the teacher that the energy of synthesis arises on a mass level before it expresses individuality or individually. However, it seems to me that the national leaders, I mean especially political, but there are more than just the political leaders. The leaders of the nations are themselves a crucial link in this process. They are themselves, in a sense, the head center and the ajna center of the nation. And it seems to me that until we have the necessary leadership in place at a national level, we will not see the United Nations restore its intended role. We know it's possible. We have seen the likes of Roosevelt and Gorbachev and possibly Helena Merkel. And yet we witness what's happening at the moment, which is the opposite. Leaders fanning nationalism. There seems to be a need for input, not just through the will of, well, certainly through the will of the people, but I think it seems to need more. It needs some assistance from hierarchy to get the necessary leaders in place. So my question, Judy, is, will you comment on the importance of national leadership in moving the United Nations forward? Thank you.
I can comment, but I see that Martha has her hand raised, who is a member of our group. So I'll let her speak.
Thank you. And my sense of this very strong presentation, Judy, was it provides a roadmap for humanity's passage through the first initiation. So Rob, when we think about leadership, I'm wondering if part of this passage in soul consciousness into and more initiative or thinking is that it may be time for humanity to look away from its traditional authorities. And that, as we have noticed, the issue that you raised, which is a very important one to understand, it falls into the mix with mass immigration, with the consolidation of funds within the hands of the few and so on. But we have so been taught in the Piscean age to think of leadership from a structural perspective. And what we may need to begin to think about ourselves is the leadership that is emerging in unforeseen ways. Judy brought up a world leader, a woman by the name of Mia Motley. And we have many leaders over the times that are not named, and yet they command the fellowship, the community of millions of people. So I put in the chat the definition of peace given by the Earth Charter, just to give an example of the quality of energetic consolidation that is taking place. So that what was mentioned is that, and Judy brought it out very clearly, in my opinion, is that the forms in all organizations needs to change radically into a more democratic way of understanding. And so if we look at leadership, acknowledging what you're saying, yes, indeed, leadership is going to be established, but it may be leadership of a different kind. And so I would point to those of us here to think about energetic leadership, to think about right relations that come through the stars, as was pointed out with the Lumdoma, that it's maybe time for us to recognize that authority is of a different order than what we've ever imagined. And it is truly the right use of energy, force, and substance. I came across a definition of compassion when in the blue books, which is that compassion is the right use of the pairs of opposites. And so, as was pointed out earlier, as this fourth ray emerges and changes everything, let's imagine what leadership might look like when the heads of state are not actually, they have been changed to servants, which is also what we meant by following the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a command to the leaders to become servants rather than heads of state. They need to become the feet of the state, not so much the heads of state.
Thank you, Martha.
I would like to follow on. I'm not Jonathan, I'm Deborah on Jonathan's link today. I really want to thank Judy and everyone else for this focus today. And kind of playing on what Rob and Martha have said, that we are experimenting in this nation's lab as pioneers, if you will, of subjective group leadership. And the new frequencies are coming through many spheres in the world of affairs, but very few in the world of politics and economics. It's coming through in groups like this one, and groups all over the world. So somewhere, one of the blockages that I see in the UN is that in many ways, in order to participate in the UN, not exclusively, but in a large part, one must be aligned with a national political structure to become a voice of representation of the people to the UN. And I think there may be a need for consideration that these objectifications of subjective group leadership that manifest in various groups of people who are not incorporated or aligned with national politics or organizations of any kind that are brick and mortar and incorporated are a preponderance of those members of humanity who are striving to achieve this new Aquarian alignment and mode of operation, this energetic, conscious wielding of energy, force, and substance, as Judy said. So avenues need to be opened within the structure of the UN in the same way, finally, that Africa was given admittance to the Security Council, in the same way that consideration is being given for the next Secretary General to be a woman. There's a new world coming. The rest is breaking apart. It's very difficult for those of us who are working subjectively to be housed within the boundaries of a country that unilaterally withdraws from agreements that are made internationally. So it's a suppression of sorts. I'm just saying we need to consider new avenues of inlet into the actual 3D structure of the UN for that consciousness to have a touchdown point.
Hello, this is Jill from the United Kingdom. I've only recently found out more about the United Nations, and prior to that,
I really didn't know much about it at all. And I feel that is so with a lot of humanity. They really don't take that much notice of it. They don't realize the importance of it. And I was brought up many years ago under the old type of education, and the carrot and the stick sort of thing. And I used to think, well, the United Nations, when these countries do something that appalls everybody, they should be immediately expelled. But I now change my mind, and I know that as soul conscious people, we must show compassion to all, even those that we think are in error. And so I just thought I would put that into the mix. Thank you. Oh, and thank you, Judy, for the lovely presentation.
Is there anyone else, or we need to close?
I would like to just respond to Deborah's thoughts about looking for openings. I think, in fact, that is what our group does every week. When we wield the energy of synthesis to the extent that we can, when we invoke those higher energies, when we bring it across the Sustainable Development Goals and call for basically the soul consciousness of everyone that is part of a sense of light within their nations to be able to receive and move these goals forward as souls within their nation. As we look and read about each goal that we hold each week, where we see light coming through, and we align with those workers. So we're doing it on many levels, but it's not just we. I think that the whole new group of world servers is standing together in an alignment and bringing light through so that the leadership and those openings are saturated with the light that we can bring down so that it really spreads. And we're just one of many groups, but all together as a united world group and standing with all those of light, I have to believe that we are being impressed to bring together and unite through light.
And I would also add to that the presence of many non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, have been a very pertinent presence and really do affect and move the dynamics within the General Assembly of the UN, I do believe. And these are myriad. Here in the United States, there was UNA USA, but there's Quaker group, religious, of great variety of folks that are not representing governments there.
Yeah, okay. What an impact this presentation has made. To me, it shows what a group can do that is dedicated and focuses for a number of years on one thing. Yeah, we can really make these inlets subjectively, and we can. It's visceral what this is doing. Okay. So let's just wrap up this richness. Let's one more time close our eyes and bring our awareness back into the silence of the council chamber of elders in training. Just breathing and centering and enjoying what we are holding together and affirming for a moment our shared presence and our high vibrational space. And retaining all that we have shared within this high vibrational space, this group work space, for further absorption, transmutation, and radiation. Let us as a group extend our appreciation and blessings on the working group, on the UN meditation group for their further work. And also on the UN. Just radiate this richness, and our intention, shared held intention, onto the UN. Okay, releasing and returning to our personal grounding. We will continue our focus on the United Nations also in the next Nations Lab session, which will be on March 11. And over to you, Alexander, for any announcements.
Thank you, Uta, and thank you, friends. I suggest we use this time till the next lab session on March 11th, holding our group focus on the potency of the United Nations, linking with the founding impulse that brought this unique international entity into existence. And when we meet next month, we can continue our sharing. And as always, I want to invite you to join other events organized by the 2025 initiative, including the daily vigil and the meeting in the garden, meeting that we have every month at the time of the full moon, aligning with astrological qualities of each month. You see other meetings that are scheduled here on the screen, so please join us. You can find the registration links on our website, 2025initiative.org.
Okay. Yes, and let us end this session with a great invocation in a special rendition, which Judy will introduce.
The great invocation that you're about to hear was sounded in the General Assembly by Eleanor Roosevelt in 1953 for the World Invocation Day, one of our 3 festivals that we hold. So these are the words that went through that hall. and hopefully they're still resounding. Alexander will play the tape.
A great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the Master knows and serves. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.